everybody. Thank you for joining us once again today. Today, my very special guest is Colt Milton. Colt is a carnivore bodybuilder and a runner as well. That's interesting. We'll talk about that a bit, I'm sure. Also a competition coach, along with his wife Taylor, who is competing for her first time this year on a meat-based diet, so that's fantastic. Since losing their corporate positions during the events of 2020, they have launched supersetyourlife.com, which is a movement dedicated to long-term aesthetics, health, and total body optimization. So no pressure at all, Colt. Those are some big claims, and I'm sure you can back them up. Otherwise, I wouldn't have you here on the show. But welcome for your first ride on the crazy train. The only rule here is keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle throughout the ride, and do not stick your head out of the window, because we know what happens when you do that.
Right.
So let's dive right into it. Obviously, this is an opportunity for a bit of cross-pollination, a bit of promotion of what you do. So we'll ask you about where to find you at the end of the program as well. That means people have to stick around to the end to find out how to find you. But in the meantime, let's start with question 1, which is pretty straightforward, and it goes like this. Is it possible? Can you build significant muscle mass on a carnivore diet without carbs? Because we're told you must have carbs to build muscle. Is that correct, or is it not?
That is definitely not correct, and it has definitely not been my experience. I'm going to be using the words my experience probably a lot on your questions, because I'm not a college graduate. I'm not. Let me put it this way: I'm an athlete and a coach, and so I'm like a lab rat. So what what I understand about muscle protein synthesis, correct me if I'm wrong, because you probably understand this better than I do, is that there's 4 things that are required to build muscle. You need protein, obviously. You need a stimulus, something to give the muscle a reason to want to grow and to have to adapt, growth being the result of that. You're going to need water, and you're going to need sleep. And to get that stimulus, you're going to need some sort of fuel. So that fuel can come from carbs. It could also come from stored glycogen through something like gluconeogenesis, which is more or less what my diet looks like right now. Or, of course, it could come from ketones. It could come from dietary fat. That fuel does not necessarily need to come from carbs. And then there's the insulin argument that, oh, well, if your insulin is too low all the time, then how are you going to build muscle? Because insulin is definitely needed to build muscle. On the insulin topic, anytime you eat protein, your body produces enough insulin without having to jack it up with something like dextrose or any carbs for that matter.
Brilliant. I wouldn't add anything necessarily. I wouldn't try and improve that answer, because it was absolutely functionally, strictly supportable and correct in every respect. Yes, so the idea that you require carbohydrates to build muscle mass is false. Good. We're on a good start. Let's keep it rolling that way.
However, may I also add that there are many athletes that do perform better on a high carbohydrate diet, and I just happen to be one of those that definitely does a lot better on a low carbohydrate diet. So, for a lot of our athletes that we're training, we'll put them on higher carb diets, and yes, they do have carbs in their plan, because they're just building muscle faster because they're able to perform better. Not that the carbs in and of themselves are necessarily contributing to any additional muscle mass.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I quite agree with you that there are many athletes from many different sorts of sports who actually do perform as well or better than they personally did on a high-carb diet when you get them properly transitioned across, when they've made a full metabolic reprogramming, I guess, and are now fully fat-burning athletes is what we call them. Mm-hmm. I could give you 3 examples. Obviously, I can't name them because of client privilege, but I have in my current stable of paying clients who get advice from me on aspects of nutrition and physical performance training, methodologies, etc. I can tell you I have one professional MMA fighter who performs better, it seems. His results have been better, win to loss ratio, all of that, on a low carb diet. He is outlasting his opponent, and that's, you know, all things being equal, skill being equal, all of that, that's important. I have a semi-professional former world champion bodybuilder, same deal, both in training and in lead up to performance preparation for being stage ready. Low carb has been better for him than any diet he ever tried previously, including any amount of carbs. And I also have a really only just sub-professional middle distance runner who you would suspect of all of those three examples would be the one that would suffer the most, because those people are told you must have carbs to run. Well, no.
Scientifically speaking, it makes more sense if you're going to be an endurance athlete to be fat-based anyway. I'm sorry,
of course it does. Of course it does. Yeah, I mean, you and I know that, but most of these athletes and their coaches don't know that. So it's kind of an uphill battle to sort of bust through that and to retrain these athletes and to really break what is really a very, very powerful brainwashing that they've often been subjected to since they were a child athlete. So yeah, anyway, that's for another day. Let's move on. Let's talk about more about hypertrophy, because that's obviously your thing. Mm-hmm. So how is hypertrophy training itself different when you're consuming a lot of protein versus how you might approach it on a ketogenic diet? And maybe talk a little bit about what the difference between a high protein diet and a ketogenic diet is as well, as kind of part of that.
You got it. Yeah, I like to think of it and explain it the best in terms of thirds. So if you take the ketogenic diet, it's basically 2/3 fat and 1/3 protein. You're around like 66 to 80% of fat on the high end, depending on where you best function in that ketogenic state. On the high protein carnivore approach, it's what I call it. I don't know what else to call it. It's basically the opposite. You're consuming 2/3 of your calories from protein and 1/3 of your calories from fat. Yeah, so that's a lot of protein, obviously. So for a guy like me, for example, I weigh around 195 to 199 pounds. I'm basically maintaining my body weight right now on 4,000 calories a day. Pretty much exact. It's easy to remember. And then 66% of my calories are coming from protein. So that's obviously way more protein than my body needs. I think it's around 400 to 450 grams a day. So that extra protein, my body will use 200 grams-ish of that protein to build muscle. And then all the extra protein that is definitely more than I need, it doesn't get wasted. It can't get stored as fat, so it gets converted to glycogen through a process called gluconeogenesis. So when I consume that amount of protein in a short amount of time, because I'm eating 1 or 2 meals a day, that is the last meal that I eat right before bed. So I'll wake up. I'll wake up having recovered from my workout the day before. And I'll also wake up feeling more of like I'm on a high carb diet, like I did consume carbs, because now I'm running on glycogen, which is basically just a stored version of glucose. So that approach is different than being ketogenic. Now, if you're training on glycogen, you're going to be your gym performance is going to be great with anything that's explosive. Something like HIIT cardio, jump rope, 8 to 12 rep range on most body parts. That's all glycogen that your body uses as its primary fuel source. Anything lower rep ranges than that, you're depending more on your creatine phosphate system, like the 3 to 5 heavy rep, like powerlifting rep range. And then anything from 15 to 20 reps, typically you're burning more fat for fuel. So my experience has been on a ketogenic macro split. With most of my, this is what I usually like to do for a contest prep or for cutting, is I'll focus on those heavy lifts, but mostly on the 15 to 20 higher rep ranges. And then for lean bulking, I like to do the higher protein approach because of all the additional protein that comes with building muscle. helps me to get there faster. But that's when I'll focus more on the glycolytic explosive moves in the gym. So by that time, my body's kind of burnt out and ready for a break and ready for a change in training anyway. So that's the best way that personally I've found to manipulate my macros to keep the body guessing and growing in that way.
Okay. Some interesting stuff in that, and we probably don't have time to dive down that particular rabbit hole today in this interview, but you and I can discuss that in the background at some point, because there's some really interesting things in there that I would probably tweak.
I would love to hear what you would suggest about tweaking that too.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of people that bodybuild with these macro ratios.
Well, I mean, in short, under no circumstances would I consume that much protein, personally. Even if I was in heavy hypertrophy training, which frankly I haven't been for about 30 years since I last did any hypertrophy training to speak of. But yeah, that would be one thing I would tweak. I would have you pretty much on a stable intake of probably 66-33 fat to protein, give or take 5% all year round. And the reasons for all of that and the underlying physiology and stuff we can talk about either in another interview at another stage or behind the scenes at some point. Good.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to ask what your concern was, if it was creatinine levels or liver panels, or
well, it's the gluconeogenesis, frankly.
Okay.
I mean, you're not getting fat and necessarily hugely inflamed on that, precisely because your training is oxidizing a lot of that glucose that's being produced. Your muscles are storing quite a bit of it as glycogen. But you will not be escaping the inflammatory process entirely, which I mean, there'll be some indication for inflammation as part of the process of hypertrophy training, but it's a J-shaped curve in terms of the benefits and stuff. So yeah, that's just one thing that I would throw in there. All right, good. Interesting one. Intermittent fasting. Do you think that intermittent fasting will increase the rate of fat loss for someone who is trying to cut fat from their body, basically, specifically? And in the specific context here is that this person has been low carb already for some time, and their level of adiposity, their fatness on their body is stalled out. It's not coming off for whatever reason, and I think I could probably guess what it is. What do you think about all that? Does intermittent fasting... First of all, tell us your definition of intermittent fasting, because everyone's different, and then tell us whether you think it's, given that definition, that particular approach to it, will it be helpful or not?
Okay. So to make sure I understand the question correctly, as an example, we have someone that's been a lady that's been consuming 5 meals a day, and she's in ketosis, and then she's wondering if consuming the exact same foods just all in one meal will, in and of itself, speed up fat loss results. And all calories and macros are equated for, and those are the same, right?
Okay. All right. So you're just talking about OMAD, really, rather than fasting per se.
Okay. And then back to your definition of intermittent fasting too. It's for me, it's being personally, it's being in a fasted like state. So here again, carnivores, it's like, okay, what's your definition of actually being carnivore, right? I'm eating meat 95% of all my calories. And but I am definitely drinking like a pre-workout and stuff during my fasted window that wouldn't be considered okay by some people in terms of intermittent fasting. So
right. So you'll have to hand your card in basically and report for public naming and shaming. You did it wrong, and you never really were an intermittent faster.
I'm sorry, what's that?
You did it wrong, and you never really were. Yeah. No. Okay. Good. All right.
Yeah, we're gonna get kicked off of the carnivore team or the intermittent fasting team, I guess.
I guess. All right. So it's interesting because in my world, I actually define fasting, personally, operationally, I define fasting as the non-consumption of food for 72 hours to 96 hours. I do not suggest that someone should necessarily fast for longer than 96 hours. That's why I put the upper range number there. But I do not consider anything less than 72 hours without food as a fast. Strictly speaking, the second you finish your last meal and swallow it, until you next put food in your mouth and swallow that, you are fasting, even if that's 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Technically speaking, fasting is not eating food. However, I have an operational definition because in my mind, in my world, there is really no benefit necessarily in fasting until you get to around about 72 hours. And it's that space of time between about 72 and 96 that is the actual golden area in terms of the benefits of fasting per se. So just eating once a day, we just call that OMAD, O-M-A-D, or 1 meal a day. So I would, the first thing I would say is, number one, anyone who's eating 5 times a day, here's the issue with it, personally. Every single time you eat food, whatever that food is, it makes no difference. Your body automatically, immediately undergoes a period of inflammatory response because of the way we've evolved and the foods we ate as we evolved. Every time we ate food, it was a risk in terms of pathogenic invasion to our bodies associated with that food. And so the body needs to be ready to react. Should this meal be the one that contains those nasty bacteria or whatever, because we've scavenged a kill from some lions or we've found some carrion that's been dead a few days or whatever, we evolved mostly as gatherers, scavengers. We only developed hunting later for fresh meat. That's why we have stomach pH as low as we do, basically to kill off those bacteria. That's why that still exists in our genome. That's why we have that, it seems. So if you're going to cause low-grade inflammation in your body over and over again 5 times a day, which will last several hours every time postprandially after your meal, you are basically placing yourself in a chronically inflamed situation. The reason that people that do a lot of hypertrophy training, etc., generally would eat lots and lots of meals a day is 2 things. One, they don't think they can absorb all their protein in one whack because somebody's told them you can only absorb 40 grams of protein at a time. Absolute rubbish, by the way. Nonsense. So that reason doesn't stack up. Or secondly, there's either too much protein or too much carbohydrate in the diet, both of which will drag the blood sugar down lower than it was before they ate, making them feel hungry again several hours later, causing them to eat again. So they're probably actually overeating as well. They're not getting fat because they're using a lot of that energy in repair and renewal of tissues in between trainings and during the training itself, etc. But nonetheless, again, it's the same argument as I gave before about that's why I wouldn't eat that much protein, because chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, seriously problematic for your long-term health. So I wouldn't be doing that. I would always suggest someone should eat 1 meal a day. Yes, go, Colt.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one thing onto that too. This is never a long-term thing that I ever recommend that somebody consume that amount of protein. This is a temporary lean bulk,
Sure.
and so this is usually a 2 or 3 month phase before going back to keto.
Sure.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, good. No, good clarification on that. That's less problematic, obviously, than it being a long-term ongoing thing, but nonetheless, I still would probably personally avoid that. Someone would have to really convince me that there was really, truly a lot of benefit in doing it, and I would want to be tracking someone's inflammation throughout that process to check that. Anyway, so there's that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Sorry. Back to your definition of fasting.
Yes.
Which I agree with 100%.
Okay. All right. Good. So the context of that question, I think we've nailed that down. I think we're probably on similar pages, which is fine. And even if we weren't, that's fine. You are allowed, of course, to disagree with me. However, that's defined as hate speech on this channel. Hate speech for anyone that disagrees with me on anything. It's the same around here around the house. Anyone who disagrees with me is indulging in hate speech, and they will be reported to the authorities.
Why do you think I got an Australian Shepherd, man? Well, she agrees with it. She never disagrees with you. You know, your dog thinks you walk on water. I'm just trying to be the man she thinks I am.
Yeah, my partner's 2 dogs both see me very much as the beta. Mummy is the alpha in their minds, and I only have any authority if she backs me up. Otherwise, it's like, who do you think you are? You know,
really.
And these are 2 little yappy dogs. Oh, one of them's more yappy than the other, but that's for another day. All righty though. Okay, so looking specifically at recomp. So in a period where you are trying to change your body composition from what it is to something else. Now, I'm imagining in my mind that means, for the most part, for most athletes, you'll go through a period of bulking where you'll put on quite a bit of muscle mass, and also attendant with that, often a lot of fat goes on as well, precisely because of either too many carbohydrates, which is any at all, or indeed too much protein, which can lead to that. And then you have to get that fat off while maintaining the muscle. Of course, my answer would be don't do that in the first place, then you won't need to recomp. But let's say you do need to recomp. What are the optimal macronutrient ratios in your mind?
It's gonna depend on every single person, but
good, like it. Go on.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying good. I like that already. Carry on.
Yeah, and so when it comes to calories, my goal is always to, whether it's for me or for someone's plan that I'm writing, is always to get as close to maintenance as possible and to live in that zone. If we can live in the maintenance zone, if it's someone that is new to a low carb diet, they're probably going to start losing weight really, really fast, and that could be there's a number of, like, I'm not denying the law of thermodynamics by any means, but it's certainly very, very, calories in, calories out certainly is very, very complicated, and hormones play a huge role in that. And so when transitioning from a high carb diet to a low carb diet, a lot of times I bump people's calories up 100 or 200 from where they're at before, just assuming that they're going to see some good results starting right away, just from that transition. But at any rate, when we're talking about sustainably trying to build muscle and lose fat both at the same time, I'm not aware of any research that says that you necessarily need a calorie surplus or a certain amount of calories to build muscle. So the whole art is to give yourself enough fuel, which again could come from protein, carbs, or fat, depending on what works best for you and your body. As long as you're consuming enough fuel to push your muscle bellies hard enough to where they're adapting and having to grow and they're getting a stimulus, you're getting your recovery, you're getting water, you're good on your calories, and you're getting your protein to rebuild from that. You can therefore build muscle and lose fat at the same time, as long as you're not over consuming those calories.
Okay. All right. That being said, it's important, I think, that I feedback immediately on that answer. Not in so much as what you're saying is practically incorrect in terms of how someone might act in order to achieve some body recomp of some kind. I do need to jump all over this word calories. And if you haven't seen it on my channel, I suggest you have a look at my actually quite extensive playlist of videos called Calories In, Calories Out is Nonsense. It's not that it's complicated. Neither am I denying the first law of thermodynamics, because the first law of thermodynamics is called a law because it is true. However, it does not apply to human system, which is open thermodynamically. The first law of thermodynamics applies specifically, explicitly, and only to a closed thermodynamic system, which the human body is not one of. So what we have to do is actually lose this word calories from our lexicon as anyone that speaks about nutrition or health or fitness or any of these kind of issues. Human body composition is not an energy in, energy out, or calories in, calories out exercise. It simply isn't at all. It is a mass in, mass out balance, and it's affected by how much mass of various different types you consume, how much mass of various types you excrete or lose insensibly in other ways, and the impact over that balance, which is exerted by the hormonal system, the endocrine system, the inflammasome, and a bunch of other things as well. So I would suggest to you and to all people watching this video going forward that we put a great big double or triple cross out through the word calories, and we stop even considering for a second that body composition is remotely related to energy balance, because it's not. It's mass balance. Your body is made up of different sorts of mass, not energy. Energy is massless. It's weightless. It weighs nothing. No amount of putting energy in or taking energy out will change your mass, because that energy is in the form of photons, which have a rest mass of none at all. So there's that one. But what you said otherwise, other than that, it's not that you're managing someone's calorie intake. You are actually managing the mass that they are taking in and the form of that mass. Is it carb? Is it protein? Is it fat? Is it alcohol? You know, that's what you're doing when you're managing someone's so-called calories.
Not alcohol, just for the record. That's not in our meal plan. Sorry.
No alcohol. Well, I'm out then if there's no alcohol. Not interested. No, good. I'm glad there's no alcohol in your program.
Yeah, not on contest prep.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right.
May I add something on to?
Of course you may. Yes.
Yeah. So I 100% agree with you on calories, and that's probably the best explanation that I've ever heard in terms of how, yes, the law of thermodynamics is true, but there's always so many variables that in practicality there's just it's not linear. It is definitely not linear. And so we use calories when it comes to competition prep because that's the best metric that we have to go off of. It's like we have to track something, and we have to have a scalable way to reduce calories to reduce energy mass, whatever, reduce food intake and energy intake the closer that we get to a show, because at the end of the day, it does come down to getting to a certain level of extreme conditioning.
Yeah, okay, I would disagree once again on that. I would say, no, the calorie is not the best metric for tracking your intakes. Masses. Mm-hmm. Because you can weigh something exactly down to the tenths of a gram on a scale very, very accurately. You cannot get anywhere close to gauging the actual effective energy derivable from that food in the form of calories. Neither can you remotely measure how many calories you're spending, not even within 50, 60% error. So I would still absolutely lose the term calories from your lexicon altogether. I would never use that word again if I was you, except to explain to someone why it does not apply and why it is not something that you should ever consider or count or track ever. Secondly, it's not that the law of thermodynamics is complex. It does not apply to the human body at all. It has no utility in that context. The first law of thermodynamics refers explicitly by definition, by its very mathematical presentation, to a closed thermodynamic system only. Ergo, it does not apply to a human being. It's still true. It's absolutely true. That's why it's called a law. It's a law that applies to closed systems, and the human body is not one of those. So just to reiterate that point, because it seems like it needed reiterating. Okay, moving on to the next question. Are long-term expectations of how to feel, or how you might feel, on a meat-based diet the same for men And for women, and for those that identify as neither men nor women, or perhaps they're an attack helicopter, who are we to say they're not?
Yeah. This is where it's really not fair because again in my experience and in my clients' experiences, being chronically in ketosis for an extended period of time, for a male, no problem. I've never had any issues with it, and I've never seen that to be an issue with any guys. The ladies that we train, they especially my wife is the first one that we noticed it, because obviously before I was training clients, my wife and I were both doing this ourselves to this was 4 years ago when we started the keto carnivore way of life. And after, I want to say it was about 9 or 10 months, she started experiencing hair loss. And I don't know if you've heard similar stories. And so that's actually when we switched back to the macro ratios that you're not a huge fan of, but specifically to get her out of ketosis for a month or two, and so we were able to focus more on building muscle and less on fat loss, and then got her back on keto, and she's been doing great ever since that.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I have heard stories of men claiming to have had problems due to being in ketosis to a high level all the time without ever coming out of it. Examples: one, not Dr. Saladino, and I'm calling him not doctor because he's never practiced medicine in his life. He is qualified as a medic, but he has never practiced, so he's not a doctor. So not Dr. Saladino was one who claimed to have had a problem from being in ketosis, he said, without ever coming out of it for too long. Actually, his problem wasn't ketosis. In my mind, based on my understanding of what he said he was doing, if I take him at face value and say that he reported accurately and truly, his problem was twofold. Number one, not eating sufficient protein for his individual needs as a very active person, and not doing that in one meal per day. Because that's the thing that will bump you out of ketosis for several hours once a day. You don't need to come out for a few weeks. You need to come out once a day. And you do that by eating all your protein in one meal, by eating one meal a day. Pretty simple, really. And secondly, he was eating a lot of liver, both in the natural form and also freeze-dried in a tablet form, in order to promote the nonsense that he was trying to sell on due to his financial partnership with the Liver King at the time. Those were his issues, not the actual being in ketosis per se. I mean, you can be in ketosis for 20 out of 24 hours in a day and get great benefit and have your protein in one whack by eating one meal a day. That will bump you out of ketosis for 2, 3, 4 hours. Job's done. That solves that problem. Because the issue with the hair loss and the electrolyte disturbances, the cramping and the palpitations and all that sort of stuff, it's all electrolyte imbalance, which is caused by having leaky kidneys. The leaky kidneys being caused by insufficient insulin response on a daily basis at least once. So that's the solution for that one.
Wow.
So there's a lot there.
So you think manipulating some electrolytes or focusing more on that would have been maybe a better idea than just getting you out of ketosis, huh?
Well, no, because once your kidneys become leaky to electrolytes, it's like there are so many holes in the bucket that it doesn't matter how much salt water you pour into that bucket, the salt will pour out with the water through the holes in that bucket. You need to gum up the holes in the bucket, and the way to do that is to eat all your protein in one whack, in one meal a day.
Now I'm connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about eating one meal a day. If you're not going to eat one meal a day, at least getting all your protein in one whack, such that there is sufficient protein in one meal that there is enough left over that gluconeogenesis will produce a little bit of glucose, which will cause that insulin response to be much more effective than it would have been just on the protein alone. You don't need a huge insulin spike. That's not what I'm talking about. You just need a little sleeping policeman, a little bump.
May I throw out an example just to make sure I understand correctly? Of
course.
Okay. So suggest we have a lady that weighs 140 pounds, and she's consuming 20 to 30% protein, so that she's definitely in ketosis. she's eating her meals 3 or 4 throughout the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would put those together and make them one in terms of the protein.
Okay. So it'd be like probably 90 to 100 grams of protein then, huh?
Yep. Something like that at the 1.75 per kilogram of lean body mass ratio that we work with as a starting point for people. So yes, I would be doing that. And cool. to say, oh, well, you can't absorb more than 40 grams of protein in one meal, that's just rubbish.
Yeah, no, I do it every day. Yeah. It feels great.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Love everybody.
So that kind of segues to the next question quite well, really, which I think we've almost answered, but you can just add anything additional, which is, other than meat and salt in the diet, what kind of supplementation do you think is typically required for optimizing, in particular, gym performance?
Yeah, if gym performance. And are we going to go so far niche as to say bodybuilding and hypertrophy?
I think that's the context, yes. I'd go there. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just start with the supplements that I've noticed the best benefits from is obviously a good, it's obviously a good pre-workout. Does not give me any weird, I guess I don't lose any of the benefits of eating nothing but meat and salt from doing that, right? It doesn't like break the intermittent fast. It's not a fast because of our early conversation.
Yeah.
But if we're just talking about intermittent fasting, I don't lose any of my cognitive benefits or anything that I really am depending on during my training.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on how high my protein is, right now I'm not going too crazy with the creatine supplementation. Creatine is one of those supplements that is amazing for everybody, especially if I'm assuming that you don't have a lot of plant-based dieters on your show. But plant-based diet is
they do pop up from time to time to tell us we're wrong.
Yeah. So the lower my protein is, the more creatine that I would typically recommend consuming, because if you overconsume protein chronically long term, I know what you and I are going to talk about later is creatinine levels. But so that is just adding fuel to the fire at that point. And so having a good creatine, with even if your protein is high, I notice a night and day difference, 2 or 3 extra reps on every single exercise. And then when I'm keto, I'm consuming less than half of the amount of protein that I'm consuming now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I really, really depend on it. And I'll take 7 or 8 grams a day if I know I'm in ketosis, because I'm going to need it, especially because going back to our hypertrophy, our rep range topic earlier, that's when I'm going to be needing it even more so.
Okay. All right. So a couple of bits of immediate feedback there that I would say, just to add my 2p worth, whatever, or 2 cents, depending where you come from, or rupees or krona or whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay. I would say, number one, if something is working for you and you're quite convinced that it is working for you and that it is of benefit, then I would suggest it probably isn't broken and probably doesn't need fixing. So fine. However, I'm not convinced personally that creatine supplementation is either of utility in terms of your gym performance per se, or indeed entirely safe, as you've spoken about. You've alluded to the creatinine thing, so there is that.
Creatinine conversion, yeah.
It can be an issue if you're really overdoing your creatine over and above your needs.
Yeah, that's something that we saw right away with the client, and so we decided to go.
Good. Okay, so at least you're keeping an eye on those things and watching it and making sure that you're not causing a problem, so that's great. The second thing I would suggest is that, I forget what it was. There was something else that came out of that answer too. I'll remember it later and I'll email it to you. But I guess the take home is, for me, creatine supplementation, if you like, fine. Be careful. Watch your creatinine.
Make sure you're getting your blood work checked.
Yeah, get that checked. Make sure you've got that under control, etc. And So when I remember what the other thing was, I'll email you and say, oh, yes, that's what it was. It was that. Good. That being said, if you are on a fully meat-based diet, is it even necessary to track your macronutrients at all, do you think?
If you're going for overall health, great. Listen to your body and you'll get further with intuition, and just never ever. I'm not even going to say the word again.
Good.
But
Good.
We know the word that we're talking about.
Yes, the C word.
But that's the forbidden word. But macronutrient ratios, yeah, definitely. If you're looking to optimize body composition, so
sure.
That's when you have to look in the mirror and go, okay, is my goal to be as lean and as fit as I possibly can, or is my goal to be as healthy as I possibly can? If you have as much muscle as you can have within reason, to where you feel like it's to where it's healthy, and your body fat is as low as you can handle, and still I guess when you get to really low levels of body fat for extended periods of time, it's not a good thing. We all know that, and so that's just when you have to look in the mirror and go, okay, is winning a trophy what's most important to me, or is my long-term health what's more important to me? And we all have different seasons to where sometimes you need to push a little bit harder and go, yeah, this might not be the healthiest thing at this moment in time, but a month later, I'm going to start feeling normal again, and I'm going to be able to sleep just fine like I was before. But going back to sorry for the rabbit trail, just building some context.
Sure.
But back to the original question. I'm sorry, could you repeat it just one more time?
If you're on a fully meat-based diet, do you need to track? Yeah, I guess in the context of as a hypertrophy bodybuilder, someone that's competing in that kind of arena, is it necessary for you to track macros?
Yeah, because our adaptation, our natural human instincts are always going to want us to be to put us in a state to where we're surviving and where we can be and where we can be healthy. Awesome. As athletes, we're optimizing performance at whatever cost we believe is reasonable.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Good. I'll let you have that one.
Yes,
absolutely.
To answer your question, sorry.
Cool. And my aging, or not really aging, my actually aging backwards brain has offered me the other point on creatine that I forgot before, so we can backtrack a little bit. And it goes like this. You were talking about feeling as if the creatine gave you maybe 2 or 3 extra reps. Now, I would suggest that as a person whose primary focus is hypertrophy, that you would be vastly better to use that extra capacity to add resistance and keep your reps stable at a hypertrophy range of 6 to 8 reps for 2 working sets. And if you can do more than 8, then you aren't lifting enough weight. That's what I would say.
That's Dorian Yates style training right there.
Is it? Fair enough. I haven't actually listened much to what Dorian ever had to say. Perhaps I should have, but as soon as I found out, things that you find out about people pretty early on in your life as someone who's looking up to people who are hypertrophy athletes, you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. You're not worth listening to anymore. So there you go.
May I add one?
Of course you can. Yep.
Okay. On rep ranges, I would agree with that. Depending on what stage that athlete is at in their training, I'm of the belief that that your younger years are a great time to build a strength foundation, and then as you advance in your training, especially if you're a natural athlete, you're just going to get to a point to where your body can't grow any more than that. You have a genetic limit, and so
sure.
instead of progressively overloading, and I'm sure you weren't alluding to this, but just like progressively overloading to always get heavier and heavier and heavier, there just comes a point to where I'm getting a lot more mileage out of doing high reps and maintaining and continuing to build muscle without having to do the amount of strength work that was very much taking a toll on my body's joints.
Yes. I would always suggest for any athlete in any sport of any kind that what should be your first and primary consideration in terms of training is minimum effective dose.
Yes.
Minimum.
Amen.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Most people involved in sports and athletic training and all of that have this ridiculous, fundamentally false idea that more training volume is better. And when that doesn't work, even more training volume will be the answer. And when that doesn't work, it's because you need to do more volume still. To the point where that athlete will just have their athletic career burned out vastly too young before they were actually could have lasted to as an athlete.
Yeah.
It will also have a detrimental effect on that person's long-term health, almost certainly.
Totally.
You need, in my mind, to train specifically for outcomes at all times. Yep. And that means if your focus is hypertrophy muscle building, then you are doing 2 sets of no more than 8 reps at a weight you could not lift 9 times. Preferably,
otherwise you're wasting your time.
That's it.
Why are you there?
So strength training at a higher rep range and a lower resistance level not only doesn't help you with your hypertrophy, particularly beyond a given point of the diminishing returns that you were talking about, i.e. once you're a relatively well-developed athlete, it's actually counterproductive. And you should not under any circumstances do that.
You mean, okay, so you're suggesting that high rep range is like around, let's use an exercise like bench press, for example.
Yep.
That's something that we can use for high reps, we can use for low reps.
Yes. I wouldn't actually use the bench press for any reps at all, ever, unless you are a power lifter and that's required of you in your sport, in which case I would also suggest to you that you need to change your sport.
Okay,
but that's for another day. Use the bench press as an example of what you're talking about.
What's your favorite hypertrophy exercise? We'll start there.
My favorite hypertrophy exercise is not any one specific one necessarily, but it's anything that is large muscle mass, multi-joint, compound, big resistance, either free or fixed, depending on your age and stage and various other factors as well. There's actually quite a bit of research now coming out suggesting that in lifters over 40 years of age, which sadly I am quite considerably, that boat has sailed quite considerably, that those individuals, if they're training for strength or hypertrophy, are actually best served on fixed weights rather than free weights at all, which is interesting. Because that flies in the face of what we've been told about, oh, yes, but, synergists and kinesthetic awareness and all of that is compromised by this fixed plane of motion, fixed weight machine lifting. Apparently not. Anyway, that's for another day as well. I guess it's just an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's use next. So just to make sure I understand correctly, where you're going with the rep ranges then. So if we're gonna use a basic exercise like
use the bench press if you like. I just wouldn't ever do that exercise myself.
Bench press, got it.
Fine.
Yeah, no, because I see where there's no real life application for a bench press, like unless your job description includes punching somebody or maybe like a football lineman or something, or like you said, powerlifting. And I'm powerlifting not for me either. I agree with you on that. Respect to all powerlifters, hey, but I don't want to do that to my body. No. So if we're to make sure I understand correctly, you're suggesting that adding weight in the lower rep ranges to get to 8 or 9 would be more beneficial than doing 12 to 15 reps, say, even though your muscles are working for 45 seconds to 50 seconds during those slow reps on those higher rep ranges. as opposed to what I imagine for you is going to be probably like 15 seconds to get those.
Right. Okay.
Reps, right.
What you're alluding to there is a volume issue. It's a time under tension issue. There are those people who go with time under tension as being an important factor for hypertrophy training. Also,
and I'm on that bandwagon.
Okay, well, that's also I'm sorry to say that's also nonsense.
Okay.
It's not time under tension that will cause hypertrophy to be optimized. The thing that will optimize hypertrophy is rapid and explosive concentric, and as slow as you can possibly do it, eccentric. So there's your time under tension taken care of. And what you would do is you would have a weight that is heavy enough
because I do the same thing.
Right.
I think we're trying to say the same thing from two different perspectives.
Perhaps.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you've got a weight for bench press, if you're going to do bench press, which as I say I wouldn't, but if you're going to, then you would have a weight at all times that you can lift 8 times explosively concentrically and very, very slowly eccentrically, as slow as possible. So the actual set could take some time, all right? But if you could lift that weight a 9th time concentrically, it is not heavy enough. You should not do that ever. Unless you're coming back from an injury or something like that and you're retraining your strength base that was there beforehand. Personally, I would never, ever suggest that an athlete who is looking for hypertrophy ought to lift any weight or any resistance of any kind more than 8 times in a set, or more than 2 sets in a session.
Wow.
So that's different from what a lot of people would say.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I would love to talk to you more about the science in that, because that's, I mean, there's a lot of IFBB pro bodybuilding coaches that swear by that technique, that 15 to they have all their athletes training 15 to 20 reps. So.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as in middle distance running. There are literally, I would say, almost invariably every single coach of a semi-professional or professional middle distance or above runner will tell that athlete that volume is the key and they should run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles a week at a very low intensity. They are wrong. That is the worst thing that athlete can do, and the same is true of a hypertrophy athlete. While many of these guys have great success undertaking the wrong kind of training, just imagine how much better they could be were they to actually undertake appropriate training, and how much longer could their career be if they were going to do that, etc. I mean, you also need to understand that often these athletes could get away with just about doing any sort of training, frankly, and get results, because most of them are on the juice. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's definitely something we could discuss as well in terms of the various science and stuff that's been produced on that one over the years. Right, just a couple more questions and we can close off for today. The first of the remaining questions is, let's say you've been on a carnivore regimen diet-wise for some time, and some event rolls around or something happens and you fall right off that wagon and you fill your body up with crap, nonsense, non-food items, whatever. How do you get your confidence back? How do you do it?
That's kind of an emotional one. So I've struggled most of my life with an eating disorder and body dysmorphia. The carnivore diet for me has been the most therapeutic nutritional way for me to get around that hurdle personally in my life. It's something I hate talking about, but I don't think people realize that men struggle with it just as much as women do. And so if you have a bad day, let's just call it that, right? Where you feel like you failed because you were doing so good for so long, abstaining from foods that it was really important to you to avoid. To answer your question, for how do I get back whenever I have fallen off the wagon? It's been I just need to take a day and do some spiritual work and get right with God personally. But I'm also but I'm also very aware of the fact that I just need to be patient, and it's going to be about probably a week until literally food starts tasting the same again. When you're eating meat and salt and your diet is clean and you're feeling great and your sleep is good and you're experiencing all the health benefits that there are from eating a meat-based diet, you lose all those as soon as you go a day with eating like a standard American diet that's very high in carbs and processed foods. It changes your biochemistry. It changes the way that food tastes the next day. And so after about a week or two of eating and feeling right and getting that momentum going back, that's usually what I have to remember is the end goal, and to be patient doing that amount of time, and just realize that you can always draw a line and start over again.
Excellent. That's it. Absolution is always there. All you have to do is ask for it from wherever you think that should come from, and give yourself permission to move forward, get back on the horse and carry on. Brilliant. Okay, final question for you, Colt, for today. First of all, congratulations, absolutely, for having the gumption, I guess, and the courage to step into the ring and go, right, I need to support myself because of what happened during the ridiculousness around 2020. Without you saying, I can tell exactly probably what happened in terms of your existing occupations beforehand, and I salute you for doing the right thing. And I think everybody should support you, frankly. And as such, I'm going to order every member of my Meat Militia. These are your orders, my soldiers. Go immediately and subscribe to everything Colt's doing. Support him and let him know that you are proud of him for what he's doing. So, Colt, tell us where they go to see all your stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That really means the world. And it's a huge honor that you would say it about us. So, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Seriously. Our YouTube channel is Skull Bells TV, just like it sounds, all one word. After that really rough year that you just alluded to, exactly put us out of business as far as our corporate jobs go. So we started Skull Bells. We started making our own gym equipment that has skulls on it. So everything is skull themed. SkullBellz TV, all one word, on YouTube. You can also find us on our podcast, the supersetyourlife.com podcast, all one word, just like bodybuilding.com, but supersetyourlife.com, supersetyourlife.com podcast. And then on Instagram, I am at Colt Milton, ColtMilton. My beautiful wife, Taylor, is doing her first bodybuilding show this year. You can follow her at Taylor Lee Milton, TaylorLeamilton.
Excellent. According to the notes I have here, you got all of those correct. So well done, 100% on the test of where people can find you. I'll also link all that information underneath the video here in the show notes so that you don't have to remember any of that. You can just go and click directly on it. The faculty of speech, sometimes, you know how that goes. Right. Okay. Once again, Milton, thank you very much.
Right there with you most days.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time today. I do appreciate it very much. Thank you for being open to my criticisms, and I'm sure that you'll take on board some of that stuff and check out the veracity of what I've had to say. I'm sure you and I will talk more in the background as well, so do keep in touch. And we can sort of thrash some of that stuff out in the background, either privately, or we can do another interview and talk about it again sometime. Absolutely. You just let me know, and we'll sort that out.
Whenever you have time, I'd love to talk more to you. Absolutely.
Sweet. All right, my man. Thanks for today, and we'll catch you around the traps. Appreciate it.
All right. You got it.
Ciao.
Thanks again, Bart.
Ciao.